Hi Tim.
Hey.
You're a very well-known runner in Europe, especially among juniors, since you're a 2 times gold medal from JWOC sprint in a row, which is quite an achievement. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
And I'm a coach for Polish junior national team, and I asked my teammates if they have some questions, because there is a great opportunity since I'm staying at your house, and we can talk together. So I asked them to prepare some questions for you, and there is a bunch of questions, and we are going to have a little chat, and hopefully there will be some positive and meaningful insights for everyone that might be interested in what you have been doing, what you will be doing. Right? So here's the start. The first one is easy. What's your time on 10K street race?
Actually, that's not such an easy question for me. I've never run a 10K race,
Right.
but I've done 21K off-road with hills in an hour 14.
Yeah.
So that was
Long
many
time
years ago. Yeah. And
have you been running shorter distances like 3K, 5K?
for 5K in 2012, I ran 15.
Right.
So that was some years ago as well, and I haven't run one since. But for 3K, I raced one before JWOC.
Last year?
2 weeks before.
Okay.
And I ran 9:48 for that.
9:48. Okay. So this gives some estimation, I guess.
Rough years.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. The next one is how did you prepare for JWOC sprints? This might be probably a longer one. How did you analyze the terrain? What were your technical exercises to prepare for the races?
Well, first of all, I moved to Norway in the beginning of January.
Yep.
And from there, I went to a lot of training camps. Bergen Sprint Camp, for example, I was racing there. And I was running a lot of events like that. But actually, my main goal at JWOC was to run well in the forest events, mainly the long distance. So my reason for moving to Norway was to train and learn how the Norwegians are running in the forest, because they're clearly doing it very well.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to make a top 10 or maybe a top 6 in the long distance.
Okay, but you still were preparing for sprint as well, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So there's somewhere in your mind the second gold medal on sprint distance on JWOC was also.
Yeah, that was definitely on my mind as well.
Yeah. Right.
So our team, some of us mapped the area, but that didn't end up helping us too much.
Using Google Maps.
Yeah, using Google Maps. We had a really nice map, but the courses didn't go where we were expecting them to go, and our analysis was not so useful for the races. But of course, it was nice knowing the area roughly from having looked at it quite a lot on Google. Mm-hmm. And apart from that, I was training a lot for sprint with my club. I'm quite lucky with my club, Fossum, that they are running a lot more sprint than most of the Norwegian clubs.
Mm-hmm.
So we do a lot of interval training and a lot of 3K time trials and a lot of lactate tests and things like that. So
okay. Can you give us some examples of technical trainings related to sprints that you do?
I do a lot of sprint intervals.
What does it mean?
We'll be running maybe 4 or 5 legs really quickly, and then having a small break without looking at the map, and then running again 4 or 5.
So the goal of this is to learn how to read the map very quickly.
Yeah. So
while running.
When I'm running sprints, I'm usually attacking the start, which I think a lot of people aren't doing, and getting into the map, getting used to the map and things. Whereas for me, I like to pick up the map and be aggressive, straight into it. I think every second you can get in a sprint race is really important. And by the end of a sprint race, you get to this point where you're sort of running the same speed. You can't quite go any quicker. You're really tired and you're just pushing until the end. And no matter how quickly you have gone at the start, it always ends up at this sort of same pace towards the end. Yeah. And if you can get some seconds in the beginning, then it can be really useful, at least for me at the moment.
That's cool. How would you describe your technique, your sprint running technique? Do you think that you're using some special technique which you would be able to verbalize, or do you think that you're just your ability of reading the map very quickly is just there, and that's what you do?
I'm very, I think, quite simple with my planning. It will be, okay, this way is possible, this way it looks a bit better, and running it as hard as I possibly can. Not the main one is trying not to hesitate at all. So planning ahead is very important. I'm usually maybe 2 or 3 controls ahead of where I am if I'm having a good race. If I'm having a bad race, then I'm maybe not quite there, and that's when I start making the mistakes.
Okay. So let's continue to the next one. How much do you run monthly in your preparation period? For European runners, for Polish runners, it will be a period from November to March, more or less.
Well, over here it's quite hard for us because we have to be preparing for the trials a lot earlier because we need to book flights and get over to Europe, and so our trials are usually in April before.
That's quite early.
Yeah, it's very early, so we don't have much of an off season here in New Zealand. And we'll be training for the trials, and then from there we don't have a break because we have to train for the event. And so my monthly running doesn't change too much. I don't track much of what I do. I train week by week because I usually have quite a busy schedule, and I'm not sure which runs I can fit in where and what I should be doing. But I get a bit of help from my the club's coaches over in Norway, and they sort out some. They tell me which trainings I sort of should be attending and which ones I should leave out.
Right. So
I work out my week before it starts.
Right. So you said that you don't track your trainings at all.
No.
So you are your own coach, right? You don't have anyone else, so you're planning your own exercises, your own training sessions.
Yeah.
So you just take into account what you've been doing in the past few days, how you feel,
exactly.
Most
of it is how I feel.
What you have to do, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty wild, I would say.
And coming into events, I have a bit of a program, so I work backwards from the event and know that I want to have a few days where I'm not doing much, maybe some short, fast intervals.
And you already know yourself that way, that you know how much rest you need before the event and where your top shape will be.
It's nice being able to change things if you're really tired and the next day on your program there's an interval session, and maybe doing that interval session is not the smartest, and it's nice you can listen to your body and know that your muscles are not ready to go out and do this training and do something else instead. Maybe a fast bike ride or something like that.
Alright, that's cool. How do you train for running in different kind of European terrains, living in New Zealand?
We're quite lucky in New Zealand. We have a lot of different terrain. I'm sure you've noticed as you've been travelling around. I live 5 minutes away from the beach, so I can run on sand dunes and things like that. And then if I travel for maybe 2 hours from here, I can get into the mountains. I have volcanoes actually, but it's just different terrain changing everywhere. So I just do as much of different varieties of terrains as I can.
Do you feel that you would have been able to prepare for Norwegian terrain here in New Zealand?
There's one place that we were talking about going to, National Park, which is where the volcanoes are. There are some alpine marshes there, but nothing compared to Ireland. So that was one of my main reasons for moving over to Norway.
Okay. So you basically have the same problem as many countries
in
Europe, that Scandinavian terrain is just, it has its own
It's very tough to run in, and it can be a huge advantage having trained in it.
Yeah, that's the problem of Polish runners as well. That even if the navigation is not so difficult in this kind of terrain, we start to have physical drawbacks because it's just very ups and downs all the way, and it's a lot of strength running actually, even if it looks quite flat.
Yeah. And knowing where to run can be very important as well.
Yeah. Alright, let's continue. What is your most important competition during the season?
For the season coming?
Well, let's say the junior season and then the senior season. Let's divide it.
So for last season it was JWOC, that was the main focus. And of course I had WOC afterwards, but I tried to not think about that before the races.
Yeah.
And just take each race as it comes, rather than reading too much about what WOC was going to be. I didn't read the bulletin until after JWOC.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to keep WOC at a really low level until after the races, and then all of my preparation was for WOC.
Yeah.
And this year I can just focus on WOC mainly. I will be racing the World Cup races, so that will be a good indicator for how I'm going before the WOC competition.
Probably. What distances are your main focus on WOC?
I've put my name forward for the trials for the sprint and the sprint relay, the middle and the relay. But we'll have to see who else is trialing this year. A lot of people are struggling because of university and they can't get the time off to come over to the competitions. But we'll see.
Okay. So do you plan to get into your top shape for your main competition, or do you rather try to keep your top shape throughout the whole season?
I'm quite lucky with how my training works, that I can really be flexible and change what I'm doing just before races to almost peak for each race along the way. Maybe it's not quite as big a peak for the final races, but I can be quite consistent throughout, I think. So I usually try to prepare for each race as it comes, and of course there will be a lot of preparation for WOC, but of course a lot of preparation for the races before, like the Norwegian Sprint Champs and other events like that.
Okay. How often do you race? Like, not doing usual training sessions, but running in a race. It can be a street race, it can be cross-country race, and it can be orienteering race.
I grew up as a cross-country runner, so then I was doing a lot of athletics and cross-country running since I was about 5 years old. I was in the Harrier Club racing, and then orienteering took over, and I was still racing both.
What time did you start orienteering?
I was 10 years old, and then orienteering was taking over a little bit, but I was still racing all the time, both cross-country and orienteering, which I think has been really good for me. I played a lot of field hockey, and so when I was at school I was doing about maybe 4 or 5 sports, so orienteering competitively, so orienteering, hockey, cross-country running, athletics, but it's sort of combined with the cross-country and mountain biking. So I was doing a lot, and when I finished school I decided to drop hockey. It was getting quite rough on my body, and the knees were starting to get pretty bad and things. And I still run a lot of cross-country before I left to Europe, but I haven't found a good cross-country circuit or anything in Oslo yet where I can race.
Okay.
So it's just been orienteering when I've been living in Norway.
Alright. So how many events do you attend to? How many orienteering races do you do? Like, let's say how many times do you go on a map during the week?
For me, when I was in New Zealand, there's not so many orienteering events. Maybe it's similar in Poland, I'm not sure. But we would race every single event that came up, and you would race it 100%. But now that I've moved to Oslo, they have events from the start of the season till the end of the season almost every day. And it's quite hard for me to hold back on those races. Obviously, you can't go to every race and you can't compete 100%. And you need to treat some as trainings and some you should treat as races. And it's been hard for me to choose that, coming from New Zealand where we don't have races every day like that. So I'm maybe running 3 or 4 times in the forest during a week when I'm living in Oslo. And if I'm living here, it will be once a week if I'm lucky. That's quite a big difference. But I try not to go to too many races, too many of the small races when I'm in Oslo, because it's nicer running out with the thought that you're just going out for a training rather than it's being timed and you've got a little bit of pressure behind you there.
Do you use normal, is it like when you're going for a map race, for an orienteering map race, is it usually just a normal race, or do you tweak the map in some ways, put some blind spots, cut out parts of the map, cut out the roads, things like that?
Often depends whether it's set by the coaches of the club. They sometimes blank out some parts of the map, but mostly it's just a straight course.
Alright, thank you. Let's move on. If your last JWOC would be JWOC this year in Switzerland, what would you include in your preparations for the sprint race?
I'd have a a lot of analysis around the town where it is, and just trying to get as much information about it as possible. Maybe making a map would be a good idea. And as far as the training for it goes, I heard it's quite steep in a typical alpine Swiss village, and I think a lot of hill training would be involved for that, for steer intervals and things like that. But I haven't thought too much, like you said, about the...
Yeah. Your focus is walk this year.
My focus is walk this year, so I haven't thought much about JWOC.
When we were talking yesterday, you also mentioned that you do some, you can call it last minute preparations right before the race. So if you get the possibility of checking some things out, you always do it.
Yeah.
Can you talk about more
was this
about
when
that?
I was at the event yesterday? Yeah. When you get brought through, like if you're at quarantine and you're getting brought through to the race arena, trying to take in as much information as you can. When you're doing that walk, thinking about where there's stairs, where the hill slopes to, and where there could be climb and where there could be descent, and where you can make up time, basically.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Let's continue. Kasper has questions about moving to Norway. Why did you move to Norway, and do you plan to stay there for longer?
I moved to Norway. Actually, it was quite a funny story. I stayed with some people who I didn't know. I just met them through friends of friends at JWOC.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when I went to the Norwegian camp the previous year, so after JWOC in Bulgaria.
Yeah.
And I got a message from them saying that somebody had moved out of their apartment and if I wanted to come when I was living back in New Zealand again. And within about 2 months I was travelling on a plane to go and live in Norway.
That's cool.
Really spontaneous. Just suddenly decided that that would be a great idea to move over there, and it falls well with the Junior World Champs obviously in Norway, and then also World Champs in Sweden is only about 2 hours south of where I'm living. So I have plans to stay there for at least the next year, preparing for WOC.
This year?
Yeah, this year, sorry.
Yeah. Alright. What is your source of income? How do you make a living in Norway?
Mostly sponsored by mum and dad. I was working part-time as a running coach when I was in Norway, and that was saving me a bit of money, but it's been hard to get a job without knowing the language yet.
So, yay for parents.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Does your National Orienteering Federation play any role in preparations for your seasons, your main races?
Our federation will only pay for our entry into the World Champs and the Junior World Champs, so we're a bit unlucky with that. I get no other support from them.
Okay. What's your focus on mountain biking orienteering? You've been doing it a little bit, and do you have any more plans concerning it, or is your main focus on foot orienteering?
I did a lot of mountain bike racing when I was maybe 14, 15 years old, just mountain biking, and I was quite competitive here, racing against a lot of guys who are now racing for the New Zealand team for their age grade. And orienteering was what I was doing then, and when they started training specifically for cycling, then I was starting to fall behind them quite a bit.
Okay.
And I've always loved mountain biking and competing in mountain biking, and I thought maybe 5 years later that maybe it would be fun to try out this mountain bike orienteering. There was a competition in New Zealand, and I went along, and there were 6 races, and I won all of them by quite a bit. And one of the mountain bike orienteers from New Zealand decided that I should be entered in the World Champs.
Yeah.
And why not? I'll take my bike over to Europe this year and go and ride. And I had the World Mountain Running Champs actually in October, so I had some time to fill in after JWOC, and that happened to be perfectly in between. So after JWOC I travelled around for a bit and then turned up in Poland and raced the mountain bike orienteering camp.
It was like kind of a side adventure.
Yeah, exactly. But I had only done 6 mountain bike orienteering races before the competition, so I was a lot out of practice.
Yeah.
The orienteering side was definitely well trained, but the mountain biking, it had been a long time of not mountain biking. I think 3 months that I hadn't ridden a bike because it was living at a friend's house close to Poland before I picked it up for the races. It was a very spontaneous event, I think, to go to.
Okay. So you don't have plans with mountain biking or touring except for maybe other side adventures similar to this
exactly.
one, if they just fit into your schedule.
Yeah, my bike is over in Norway now, and I do a lot of cross training on it. The trails there are really nice to ride, and so maybe in a few years' time, if the event falls well with when the World Champs is on, because at the moment it doesn't work at all. It's straight afterwards or straight before, I can't remember. And maybe one day if it is nicely after WOC or something, then I will just turn up and have another go.
Okay. Alright, let's go next. So the first question is about your future career. Does it end on JWOC, or do you plan to walk on WOCs? And we already talked a little bit about that. You said that this year WOC is your main focus, so obviously you're going to keep running as a senior, and you're going to continue your career through the next few years. Do you have any deadline or any goals that you think you have to achieve, and if you don't manage to achieve them, you will just drop orienteering, or is it like you will just continue running until you feel the pleasure of it, and if you just decide that it's not possible to run anymore, or you just don't feel running anymore, you will just drop?
I was quite exposed to the elite orienteering, like the men's orienteering, from quite a young age. I ran my first WOC when I was 16.
Mm-hmm.
So
WOC?
Yeah, I've been quite lucky to be exposed to racing against the top elites. It doesn't feel like such a big jump. Of course, in the forest, it's huge, and there will be a few years before I can maybe challenge some people and get a good result for running in the forest at WOC.
Mm-hmm.
But for sprint, it feels a little bit closer. I was 40 seconds behind the lead last year at WOC, and that seems a bit more manageable than 15 minutes to half an hour behind in the long distance.
Yeah.
So I'm quite lucky that I have the sprint, and the jump between the junior and the senior doesn't feel quite as big for me. So I'll focus for sprint for this year at least, and see if I can try to get a good result.
Do you have a specific goal for this year's WOC?
I'd love to get a top 10, but it depends a lot on the terrain and whether that's going to suit me. I had a similar goal for last year's World Champs, but the course was all for the runners, and for me, I'm a good runner maybe against juniors, but against the top elite men, I'm nowhere near a fast enough runner. So I need a lot more corners and a lot more technical maps.
Yeah, alright. Second one, where did you get your motivation to be an orienteering runner, since it involves, especially for you, a New Zealander, spending quite a lot of money to prepare for most of the races that are held in usually European countries, and on the other hand there is, as everybody knows, little money in orienteering that you can get from. So what's your motivation for doing it?
Most of it is just a love for the sport and the people who are involved. It's amazing how you can travel around the world and just meet so many great people, and you really get to see different parts of the world, which is nice. I maybe would never have gone to the town in Bulgaria that I went to for JWOC, for example, and you just get to see, rather than going to a country and seeing the things that most people see, you go there and you experience the forest that
The nature.
most people would never step foot into when they go travelling.
Yeah.
So I think mainly that is, I just have quite a lot of love for the sport. It's great.
Okay, cool, awesome. Do you play catching features?
I used to, actually. There was a group of us New Zealanders who were quite involved with catching features. Obviously Matt Ogden, I think the question was asking if he was still playing. We got really good. We were second in the world or something at catching features, but I don't play it so much anymore.
Okay. Do you think that playing catching features might be useful to develop some orienteering skills?
I think it definitely doesn't hurt to be doing catching features. You're looking at a map constantly, and that can be really useful. But sometimes if the wrong techniques are used in catching features, then maybe that doesn't help. But I'm not so sure about it.
So you still have to be a little bit careful.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
But we actually mapped the 2013 JWOC terrain, and we converted it onto catching features, and that was really useful. Just running courses set on that map, and you were always constantly looking at it, but only for 2 or 3 seconds each time, like you're doing in catching features.
Yeah.
That was really useful, getting used to what the map will look like and where the courses may go.
Cool. Is Matt Ogden a role model for you?
Definitely. Yeah. He's one of the biggest role models I think I have. He obviously won the JWOC medal in 2012, and before that nobody knew that it could be done basically from New Zealand. And so when he did it and he was racing back in New Zealand and you got close to him or you were just in front of him, then you suddenly realised that maybe it was possible for you to do that as well. I think for most New Zealanders he's a very big role model.
Okay. Well, he has also moved to Scandinavia, right? So did you communicate with him before moving to Norway to get some tips on what you might expect and what you should do?
Yeah, I spoke a bit to him actually. We're quite good friends and we write to each other quite a lot. And yeah, he had some struggles when he first moved there. He missed his family quite a lot, I think, and it was quite hard for him. But he's been in a great training environment and he's been running really well.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, last 2 questions. So the pre-last one is, what are your memories for Poland? Your main memories for Poland, from Poland?
I was 15 when I was there, so it was a long time ago actually.
Yeah.
I remember staying in a really nice accommodation. We had a water slide and jumping bowling alleys and things, and that was great. And it was my first time travelling overseas without my parents, and that was really exciting for me. I felt quite old, even though I was really young. And the forest was really nice. I remember getting out of the car for our first training session and spending hours taking photos in the forest of how clear it was and how far you could see.
Yeah, it was. At least some parts of the forest.
And that's the main memories.
Okay. Do you also have some memories about Polish people? How do you find Polish people compared to New Zealanders?
Yeah, they're really easy to talk to, I think, and I don't know so many, but I always try to talk to them at the events. I have a few people that I know reasonably well. Okay.
So the last one is, if you come to Poland next time, who are you going to stay at? Whose place are you going to stay at?
That will depend a lot on where it is, I guess. I'd love to visit you guys sometime. That would be great.
You're welcome to come.
Yeah. Thank you. We'll see. I think when we're there for World Cup, we'll probably stay as a New Zealand team. But it'd be nice to see everyone there who has been asking the questions today.
Sure. Well, if you need any contacts, you can just call me or write to me.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm sure we can figure something out. Right. So thank you again
Thanks a lot.
for talking.
No problem.
All good luck in the 2016 season and the upcoming ones.
Yeah.
And I'm holding my thumbs for you becoming a great orienteer.
Thank you.
Yes.